to the national anthem, please.
Our own dear native land, though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reign. In peace or battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hang on to our children a banner without stain. O God of all creation, grant this our one request. Help us to build a nation where no man is oppressed, and so with peace and plenty, Nigeria may be blessed.
Thank you very much. Please, let's be seated. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is with pleasure that I welcome all of you tonight to this wonderful dinner. When you have a dinner event and the man that controls our monetary policy is in the midst, the food will be sweeter. And so without much ado, let me welcome here tonight the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Yemi Michael Cardoso. He didn't come alone tonight. There's the Deputy Governor Economic Policy that is here, Muhammad Sani Abdullahi. Let me welcome the chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. I don't know how he manages it. I'm not sure, apart from now that he has sat down throughout today. You know, please welcome here Mr. Olani Yusuf. We have all the members of the board of NESG. We have eminent delegates of this summit. All of you tonight, I welcome all of you. But to actually formally welcome all of us tonight, let me welcome the chairman of the NESG. I just pray for strength as he moves from his seat to this place. He has been in about 5 breakout sessions today, apart from the plenary here, and he's still bouncing. Please welcome him.
Thank you. That's something called film trick. All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us at today's dinner, what we've tagged the Summit Dinner. The Nigeria Economic Summit Group plays 4 important roles. We call ourselves the dialogue partner, connector, intervener, and watchdog. And the summit is our flagship program, but also the platform for us to bring together the public sector, the private sector, development sector, Nigerians, foreigners, business, government, etc. And so today we are pleased that tonight at dinner we have the governor of the central bank and his team. So thank you so very much. But not only has he offered to be here to dine with us, he's also will be entertaining questions from one of the NESG business leaders. And so this is a two-in-one package. It's both dinner and an opportunity to hear from the central bank governor on key monetary issues. This is also the 30th edition of the summit. And I was talking to one of the founding fathers, Dr. Sulaiman, yesterday or today, about how the summit itself has changed. And now it's become, in my view, more inclusive. Not only do we have the private and public sector, we have different sectors of the economy, not just business, but sports, arts, knowing that the economy is more than finances or a few sectors of the economy. And so at this summit, there are about 14 or so areas that we've put in place. We've had design workshops, we've had insight sessions, we've also had a few community events where communities of the NESG conference members, the PICs and co have had their own gathering. We've had plenary, we've had roundtable sessions with CEO roundtable sessions. We've had high-level panels that involved high-level government officials. We've also had interactive panel, and we're having 2 fireside chats, one tonight and the second one tomorrow with JP Morgan Chase, CEO and chairman. But beyond that, this summit, we've also had essay competition that involved youths from across the country. And we also had an arts competition and exhibition that also involved youths between the ages of 18 to thereabouts. We've had private meetings, we've had co-creation, we've also had side events. So the summit, it's more inclusive, and we've treated different topics and agenda that we believe are crucial towards forging collaborative action for growth, for stability, and also to drive the competitiveness of our nation. I have a letter from Pascal Cardoso, who is the chairman of the NESG Advisory Board, and who also was the very first chairperson of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. And he called it letter of encouragement. So if you permit me, he's asked that we should read that out as letter from the advisory board encouraging all of us to stay the course. And it says, Ni Yusuf, Chairman, NESG Board of Directors, it is with profound joy, pride, and deep reflection that I extend my warm greetings to you on the occasion of the 30th Nigerian Economic Summit. I regret that I will not be able to join you physically in Abuja due to health reasons, but while reflecting on the journey that began in 1993, I'm glad to see that this initiative has become a strong and enduring platform for charting a sustainable path for Nigeria's economic development. Even though the challenges we face today may even seem as daunting as they were in 1993 during the first summit, it further reinforces and strengthens the importance of this annual gathering. I have a strong and unwavering belief in the capacity of the 30th Nigerian Economic Summit to propose meaningful and purposeful recommendations that will uplift the lives of our people. It's also my firm conviction that the solutions we seek cannot be achieved through political reasoning alone. We need the empathy, support, and more empathy from our leaders. The average Nigerian is living through tough times now and deserve empathy from all of us. It is my sincere hope that the deliberations of this summit will inspire us all to listen to and implement the recommendations in our different capacities. As we mark the important milestone, I wish the Nigerian Economic Summit, the NESG, continued success as it convenes, intervenes, remain a watchdog, and also a dialogue partner. It is my earnest expectation that this anniversary summit marks a significant turning point in Nigeria's economic history. May God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Signed, Dr. Pascal D. G. Doze, CON. So that's a letter from PGD encouraging us to stay the course and to do all that we can for the benefit of the Nigerian citizens. And so the work that we do at the summit is meaningful, and I'd like to thank all of you, our partners, our sponsors, and more importantly, our volunteers for spending your time, your talent, and your treasure towards nation building. And I hope that when we all come back here next year and more years to come, we'll reflect about next 30, just as we did yesterday. And we were told the journey towards the pension reforms, the ICRC, the PIA, NIPC, and many other important reforms that has propelled the economy, and those reforms started from discussions at the summit. And that's what we hope we will be able to reflect in a few years' time about the conversations we've had since Sunday, and hopefully that will end tomorrow. So again, welcome to this dinner, and enjoy the moment with the CBN governor. Thank you all.
Thank you. Let me welcome the governor once again. As I was listening to the chairman of NSG read the letter from one of the founding fathers, what came to my mind are the names of the young ones running the affairs now. Dumebi, Dayo, Grace. Young people, some of them who are in their 20s. Chairman NSG, tell Dr. Pascal Doze that the NSG they birthed 30 years ago is in good hands. It's in good hands. The future is bright. So without much ado, this is the moment we have all been waiting for. Everybody seated in this room is waiting to see fireside chat. I'd like to welcome here our moderator. She is the chairperson, Sanitation and Hygiene Fund, former vice president and Secretary General, African Development Bank. And she doesn't look her position. I'd like to welcome here Cecilia Akintomide. Joining us tonight to discuss issues as we eat is a man who was the first commissioner for budget and economic planning. He actually championed the financial reform process in Lagos State. Former chairman, Citibank, a distinguished leader in the financial and development sectors with over 30 years experience in the private, public, and non-profit organizations. With diverse corporate governance experience, he has sat on the boards of Texaco, Chevron, Elfina, and many more. Today, we are very happy that this intellectual and cerebral financial expert is the governor of Nigeria's Central Bank. Let me welcome here Mr. Yemi Michael Cardoso.
Hello, sir. Yes, sir. Please. Great. I think you can hear me very well. Excellent. And do you want to test your mic, Mr. Governor?
I think you can hear me very well.
Fantastic. We can all be heard. So, Governor Yemi Cardoso, welcome to this fireside chat at the 2024 Nigerian Economic Summit. As we celebrate 30 years of consistent, result-oriented dialogue between organized private sector and the government. I stand on existing protocols, and I thank you all for being part of this conversation. We're going to make this as interactive as possible. So we'll go right into it. Governor Cardoso, 12 months. 12 months of being in the eye of the storm without respite. So when you took over as central bank governor, were there any surprises when you got in? I mean, I know you can be a fantastic driver, but it's a totally different story when you're behind the wheel in rough terrain in the middle of a storm. So what was it like when you took over?
Your question, were there any surprises?
Yes, and unexpected.
Well, thank you, and that is quite an appropriate question. But before I answer that, if you don't mind, I'd like to respond to something you said earlier, which is with respect to the 30 years of the NESG. And I really want to congratulate the NESG for such a major milestone. And I'm particularly pleased and impressed that some of the founding members and some who may not have been founding members was certainly being consistently identified with the NESG are here today. And I think it speaks volumes as to the dedication that many of our people have, both in the private sector and other sectors of our economy. So I think they deserve a very big round of applause. And it is not in my place to call them out. They know themselves, and I don't want to embarrass anybody. And to also say that I believe that the work of the NESG is required now more than any other time in the history of this country. Multi-stakeholder engagement is so critical. Sitting in one corner and feeling, well, I'm all right, Jack, this doesn't concern me, is not going to get us to where we want to go to.
Absolutely.
So I think this is a great opportunity, and dare I say that this should not be a supply-driven interaction.
Absolutely.
In other words, those in government who eventually use a lot of the outcomes from intercourse like this should be demand-driven. They should actually ask for these things. And I would challenge the NESG to continue to push and continue to ensure that the ideals for which you all stand so firm and have been so resolute about all these years are accomplished. We should not accept these events as talk shops. We should not. We have a lot of experience in the room. We have a lot of access to best practices. We should use them. We should hold people to account. And we should work collaboratively to ensure that eventually we get to where we really believe we should get to. And again, to commend the NESG for the work so far, I have had the privilege in the past year of interacting with the leadership And as I say, I commend them for the work so far and challenge them to just continue in that way. Sorry, I've used up so much of your time talking about NESG.
Sir, this evening is all about you. So use the time as you want.
Thank you. But I think it is very important to encourage the NESG for the very hard work that they are doing.
Thank you.
Now, back to your question, and at this stage in the game, you would forgive me if I've forgotten your question.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just joking. I'm kidding. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. And to say that, yes, coming into the saddle at the central bank at a very, very challenging time, people will recall that roughly a year ago, we had a situation where inflation, was in the process of taking off. We had a situation where there was a backlog in foreign currency. And the figure that was quoted at that time was, I believe, in excess of $7 billion US, which was a huge amount of money. And for that reason, a good number of the international companies were exiting because they were finding it very difficult to access foreign exchange. We also had a situation where there were multiple exchange rates, if you recall. And with multiple exchange rates, well, some were able to have access to foreign exchange while others were not. Then, of course, we had a situation where many Nigerians had lost confidence in their own currency. Many Nigerians had lost confidence in their own currency, which, of course, helped to fuel and accelerate the process of the naira losing its value. So, with such a situation, of course, one came into, and of course, something else that was also very important at that time, if I recall, was that the central bank was involved in a multiplicity of ventures beyond just its core mandate of price stability and exchange management. And really and truly, one had to make a call. And that call was to ensure that we returned the central bank to its core mandate, to ensure that the central bank focused on what was important, which was price stability, managing inflation. Very, very critical, because to our mind, once you got that right, other things would, as a matter of course, follow.
Thank you very much. Since I think you've sort of gone straight into my second question, which is 12 months down the road, it's a great time to bring out a scorecard and say, what have you and your team actually achieved? And was there anything that you think maybe, just maybe, you didn't get right? So it would be great to see how you view that scorecard.
Sure. Well, let me first of all say, sometimes when you are rating your own card, you could argue that there could tend to be a bias in favor of yourself. However, if you look at the ratings of the ratings agencies, you will find that over this period of time, they have changed the ratings of the country to positive. At least 2 out of 3 of them have done so. And if you also follow the ratings of international banks and other international financial institutions, you'll find that by and large, they see the road of travel for the central bank and for the country as positive. And don't forget that we were coming from a very, very, very difficult situation where a lot of confidence had been eroded and trust had been greatly, greatly lost.
Yeah.
So a year later, for institutions like that, who, dare I say, are not given to emotions, they look at things for what they are, they come, they visit, they ask the right questions, they critique, they've seen how these things have played off in different countries, they've seen difficulties in a multiplicity of different stations, and for them to feel that the central bank is heading in the right direction, I believe that says most of how one would evaluate the recent past. I also am appreciative of the fact that things, no doubt, have been very challenging. They have been very challenging. And that the impact has also been quite challenging on many. But it is a journey, and I believe that the progress that we have made as the Central Bank of Nigeria and as the entity that is given the responsibility of managing monetary policy in the country today is certainly one that has taken the country in the right direction. I believe there's a lot more that needs to be done, an enormous amount that needs to be done. And in fact, one cannot help but be very, very vigilant because things are changing all the time, and you cannot afford to miss any critical piece because it will have a major impact on the overall. Our goal continues to be that of stabilizing our economy and stabilizing the macroeconomic fundamentals. That continues to be our goal. And we will not relent in ensuring that we are able to appropriately manage inflation in a direction that certainly serves the well-being of everybody. I take the example of the last Monetary Policy Committee meeting, where the decision was made at the time to hike interest rates, okay, much as it may have appeared a little bit on the hawkish side. But if you see what has played out since then, okay, then it begins to give you an idea of the things that we see, and we ensure that we are ahead of the curve.
So, coming to the things that you see, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, you know, there were certain things you talked about, I would say a year ago, outlining maybe what should be on a scorecard to evaluate you and your team. And those included issues related to FX forward contracts, price stability, restoring CBN's credibility and trust as a monetary policy-driven institution based on strong orthodoxy principles. So if we just take those three,
Yes.
how have we done?
Yes. Well, look, in terms of orthodoxy, we have deliberately stayed away from interventions. Okay, our view is that as a central bank, our focus will continue to be to use orthodox monetary tools to manage inflation. We are in a situation where excessive interventions had gone on for several years, and those contributed in no small measure to the situation that the economy found itself. Our view is basically focus on managing inflation and focus on stabilizing prices, focus on foreign exchange management, and leave that to the DFIs, and indeed collaborate with those that we can collaborate with. But that certainly is not a function of the central bank. The second thing with respect to the forwards. Yeah. You know, at the time I spoke about this was when I was going for my clearance at the Senate. I mentioned it first there before I mentioned it at the Institute of Bankers event. At the time I mentioned this, all I knew was that there was a huge backlog and there seemed to be a problem with the finances of the central bank. I think I knew that, and everybody else seemed to have that impression. And one could be forgiven at that time into thinking, well, let's push this backwards and worry about it later. That for now, we had a situation where there were pressing issues with pressing immediate demands. But I didn't do that. It was very clear to me that that was something that needed to be tackled immediately. And when I say immediately, at least giving confidence to international investors and others that as a central bank, we would meet our obligations. It was important to do so. We, of course, went through the process of verifying the claims. And as and when we began to have a better understanding of the claims and the appropriateness of the claims, yeah, we met them. I know that as at now, there are still some which have been unverified, and we're working on those. We are at a particular stage now where we've gone through stage 1 and we're about to go into stage 2 to verify those claims as the case may be. So, to all intents and purposes, as we stand, we have taken care of the verified claim. The third one.
So, restoration of
the trust,
credibility,
of the credibility of the central bank. Yes. Now, again, what I said earlier pertains to that, yeah, and that was part of it. But more importantly, and very importantly, we had to ensure that we could walk the talk. Because that really and truly is the way you build credibility. No point in saying you will do one thing and not do it. You have to be transparent in the way you undertake your operations. And I must say that one of the things we have done with the MPC meetings is that after every MPC meeting, we have a question and answer session where members of the press are very free to ask the questions, and they do. And some of those questions, difficult though they may be, we answer them. Because we think it's important to get the word out there and to ensure that people can see that we are as open and transparent as possible. And that was something that we did during the course of the verification of the forwards as well. We put out the information and we allowed people to have a line of sight and to have an idea of where we are going and how far we expected to continue on that particular trajectory. So that increasingly is something that we're ensuring that as a central bank, we're bringing out our activities more and more to people. Our website is about to be significantly overhauled. Very shortly, you'll see a new website, and that's all headed in the direction of transparency of operations.
Fantastic. So openness, transparency, accountability, and orthodoxy. And actually, there's a piece of good news. The corporates in this room actually wanted me to convey their appreciation because there was a discussion at some point between the corporates as well as the team at the central bank. And there were a few issues that were raised. One included a trade pricing portal that just created an extra layer, and that portal has been removed. So please let's give a round of applause for the central bank. And of course, the second issue that was discussed, which you have mentioned, is the balance of the FX forwards that you've mentioned that that's been worked on. So there, in this room, there are huge expectations on those FX forwards. So, but we've heard that that is being addressed. So we're happy about that.
No, Cecilia, I must emphasize that a lot of the journey so far, and if you look at a lot of the policy reforms that we've undertaken, a fair amount of that comes from dialogue and listening to people and understanding the problems. You know?
Right.
Yeah, it comes from understanding the problems. I mean, if you do not understand the problems of the people you serve, then how do you take care of them? Very difficult. So just to say that we will not tire from having the dialogues that we are having and understanding the problems that people face and seeing how we can work hard to ensure that we take away all the different impediments in the way. I can give you another example. The IMTOs, you know, we had decided that this was a sector we needed to focus on. With the limitations from other sources of foreign exchange, we took it upon ourselves to engage with the IMTOs. When I was in Washington for the spring meetings, the IMF World Bank spring meetings, I called the different IMTOs, and many of them flew in from different parts of the world. And we engaged them extensively and understood what their problems were and got their buy-in into doing the things we wanted to do. And when I came back, we significantly overhauled that operation to make it a lot easier for them to get their licenses, to begin to operate. And happily, we've seen the results of that effort. I would say that when we started, the volumes that were going through the remittances from overseas were in the region of maybe about 200 odd million. And as at the end of last month, we are almost $600 million coming in from there.
Fantastic. So, you know, I'd like us to do a deeper dive into this whole issue of understanding the problems of the people, of the businesses. And you used a phrase that I appreciate a great deal, the people you serve. So you're governor of the apex bank of a country that wears, unfortunately, the label of poverty capital of the world. Underdeveloped, grossly unemployed, desperately in need of building infrastructure and building a real sector. And at the same time, you talked about the recent hike in the monetary policy rates. And actually, so the rates went from 26.75% to 27.25%. And actually, within the past 12 months, we've seen like an 8.5% increase in rates. CRR of money deposit banks also was nudged upwards from 45 to 50%. For merchant banks, from 14 to 16%. The almighty Naira dollar exchange rate has gone from 768 to 1600. So there's a challenge that we see here, and challenge of divergent realities and divergent needs. And so you're making certain trade-offs. And I think it will be great for those in this room to understand what's driving the trade-offs you're making, particularly when you think of the recent high, which I think a lot of people were not expecting, and it sort of came as a surprise. But we know that you're making trade-offs, you're making choices between a rock and a hard place. So what are those trade-offs?
Okay. That's a very good question. And before I go into that, let me just say that as far as I am concerned, I see no substitute for the fundamentals of an economy. No substitute. So before you start talking about the trade-offs you are making, I think we all have to agree that ultimately we have to get the fundamentals of the economy working. That is just a fact, okay? We've got to ensure that the engines and the levers are running efficiently and effectively. We've got to ensure that the institutions are being built, and I think that's part of the discussions that no doubt has been taking place here over the course of the past day or so. We've got to ensure that we're able to balance up between demand and supply. These are very critical, basic issues that need to be addressed before you even get to the point of trade-offs. And as far as I can see, that's all work in progress, and it's something that definitely needs to be given all the attention that is required. We do need to go back to addressing the fundamentals of the economy. We've been a monolithic economy for so long. The opportunity to diversify the economy continues to be there. And I believe there are certain things that are happening in the economy that perhaps will make that even more of a reality. The example I gave you of increasing the remittance flows, okay, is a classic example of being resolute in wanting to succeed in a particular effort. Okay, and when I say this, I'm not just talking about the central bank or anything. I mean, that goes for all Nigerians, okay? We need to diversify economy, and different stakeholders need to be resolute in ensuring that that happens. Now, with respect to the central bank, the monetary side, obviously, and that's why I started off by talking about this, that the monetary side is there to more or less create some stability, okay? But it doesn't substitute for the fundamentals. It does not, okay? So we have a situation where, from our perspective, taming inflation is key, okay? Taming inflation is key, because if you do not tame inflation, it has such a major throwback. It can deter investment. It significantly reduces purchasing power. And for those who are in productive engagement may find that the people that they expect to be buying their goods are not empowered to do so. So it is so important for us to tame inflation and keep it under control. It is critical. Sometimes we expect that the trade-off between the real sector, high interest rates, and of course, the whole issue of inflation could be a timing issue. And ultimately, we hope it goes that way. That is, that as inflation begins to moderate, interest rates start to come down. And of course, it's a lot easier for the productive sector to operate. So that is really the hope, and that's the trend that we expect we will get to in the not too distant future.
So taming inflation is critical, getting the fundamentals right and getting them working and being resolute about diversification of the economy. Now, I have my own question, and I hope some of those in this room, at least the women in the room, are also interested. We constitute 50% of the population of Nigeria, 52% of smallholder farmers that are going to put the food on tables, including the tables in this room this evening. 40% of MSMEs, we own them as women, yet we are underfinanced, underrepresented, underconnected digitally, and at risk in every way. So what can the female constituency expect from the central bank governor? First, even within CBN, your policies within CBN, and then externally.
Well, let me first and foremost say that my personal position on that. When I went for my Senate screening, I actually did commit to advancing the cause of gender. And the reason I did this was because in my previous experience, I had done a number of things which significantly empowered women in the boardroom in particular and in other spheres of life. So that is something that you are certainly talking to a converted on.
Good, you're a he for she,
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, I'm definitely a convert on that. I believe women provide a very, very major and significant portion of the workforce, and indeed the earning capacity, and indeed what we see, not just in Nigeria, but in many parts of Africa, with the role that women have played quietly, but effectively, is something that certainly needs to be encouraged and resources put into. So that is, and I think at the central bank, since you asked that question, I think they listened to the Senate confirmation hearings and they took that on board, and the expectation is there, and I don't expect to disappoint them in that respect. Now, in terms of policies to the outside, we are committed to ensuring that we encourage the banking industry. And I must say that the banks at different stages of managing their own internal processes towards bridging the gender gap. I must admit there are different stages, but I think the awareness is there, and there seems to be a commitment towards driving in that direction. It won't happen overnight. It will not happen overnight, but it's something.
That night is getting too long.
No, it's not really. And I think a lot of this comes from leadership. And I think that you asked the question and I've given you an answer, that you can rest assured that under my watch, I will do what is necessary to ensure that we can give the necessary impetus to women entrepreneurs, for example. And I must tell you that a week or so ago, the Central Bank of Nigeria signed a code for women entrepreneurs financing. And we are going to implement a framework, okay, that would hopefully lead to greater financial inclusion for women within the country. We partnered both with Development Bank of Nigeria and the Bank of Industry. So between the three of us, we are committed to advancing that cause. So you can rest assured that you have reliable partners and stakeholders who are thinking exactly the same way you are, to ensure that women are encouraged to get their pride of place.
Fantastic. Now, this has been interesting times in the banking sector, a lot of noise, good news, and sometimes not so good news, or good news misunderstood. Certain banks crossed the trillion naira mark. Some saw it as fantastic news. Others, customers are screaming blue murder. Complaints about digital banking services in the market, just one bank failure. So from your view, what message do you want to send about where the banking sector is today and your perspective and your stance in how you're engaging with the Nigerian banking sector?
Sure. Good question.
And also the capitalization.
Yes, yes. And in fact, I can't start off with the capitalization because, and hopefully that should illustrate the approach we're taking to the banking industry.
Yeah.
Now, when I announced the recapitalization at the Chartered Institute of Bankers event, and in actual fact, I'd spoken about it loosely before them, but let's even say from there. I signaled to the banks that this is where we were going. I didn't give a figure, but I felt it was important to let them know that we considered it necessary to go in that direction. And I recall that at that time, a lot of banks felt that they really didn't need that much capital. However, between that time, October or November in the previous year, and about April in the following year, March, April the following year, devaluation had wreaked havoc in banks' balance sheets, havoc. And I don't think anybody anticipated that it would go so quickly and in that direction. And so when I now finally gave the figure around Easter, I think it was abundantly clear to the banks that there was need to actually increase their capital to create buffers, okay, and ensure that we had a strong, resilient banking system that could take us towards the $1 trillion GDP that is projected by the president. Now, it is important to stay here because hopefully this should give you a flavor as to the way we've been interacting with the banks, that we had given enough time from the time we announced it. As I said, even before then, there'd been something like an almost 5-6 month gap.
Yeah.
And then from the time we announced it, we gave them another 2 years. Okay. And in addition to that, we have given the banks the option to choose the category of licenses that they want to stay on. We have not made it an unduly draconian and difficult regulation. We are convinced that it is important to support and work with the banks and the banking system to understand their issues, their problems, and work with them to solve them. And from what I have seen so far, the road towards recapitalization seems to be going in a proper trajectory. Those who have already blown the whistle has been blown for some of them. They are out there raising money, and so far, so good. So far, so good. And I'm confident that it will work out well. And those who want to stay in particular categories can do so. Those who decide, well, we don't need to be there, perhaps may do something differently, I don't know. But we've given the options. Now, we also understand and appreciate that as our role as regulators, it is important for us to be ahead of the game. And it is for that reason that we are doing an awful amount, putting an awful amount of effort into strengthening our capacity to regulate. So our banking supervision capabilities are being strengthened considerably to ensure that as the banks themselves are navigating through the challenging terrain, we are there to ensure that things are done in a rightful manner, and that on balance, again, back to the phrase I used earlier, the constituencies that you serve are served rightly. That is something that is very important to us. Over a period of time, of course, where certain aspects of policy need to be revamped, they will be revamped. And in actual fact, they have been. They have been. And I believe the banking industry is strong and is really resilient to be able to withstand any potential shocks.
Excellent. Now we're going to get to the lighter side of the question. So, they always say it's great to see the end from the beginning. So how are you going to define success? What will success look like for you at the end of this journey?
Well, something that is very important to me. I think that central bank needs to evolve into being an institution that works and works efficiently. And let me say a little bit more about that. I don't want to leave the central bank with it being about me. I believe we have to build capacity within the bank. We've got to give responsibility within the bank. We've got to ensure that we attract the best people. We've got to train them to be ahead of everybody else. We need to ensure that the central bank is one that will be the envy of the industry, not only the banking industry, but central banks worldwide. And I must tell you that over the recent past, I've been very privileged to interact with a lot of central bankers all over the world. And I can see that over a period of time, a lot of the strengths that we had perhaps been diluted a little. And one needs to ensure that one can build that back up, ensure that we operate very ethically, ensure that our constituents can do things with us in a manner that does not need to come in and know people, and that you don't have to know the central bank governor to get things done or the deputy governor to get things done. Those are things that are very important to me, that we build the core fundamentals of the central bank in such a way that it operates in a way that is open and transparent, and you can know exactly what to look for. And I'm pleased, I must say, because I've heard from a couple of the bankers who in the beginning perhaps thought that they had to come to me for everything, and are now realizing that they don't. Okay, there's a hierarchy. There are a lot of things that we need to do around the central bank to transform it into the ideal model. And certainly at my level, I would commit to getting less and less involved in the more routine issues, but devote more time to policy development, and which you've seen a lot of that coming out from the central bank. But we want to ensure that it gets entrenched within the bank, that the bank understands that, and the outside public understands that the interface with the central bank is one where it's open, it's transparent, you can get things done, and you don't have to know anybody.
That's fantastic. So you have reiterated this issue of openness, transparency, and building an institution that works, an institution with talent, an institution with capacity, and an institution that works ethically. So, I mean, there are quite a few young people in the room. So what message do you have for young Nigeria?
You know, one thing that we all have got to be very conscious of now is that Nigerians and Africans in general have a youth board.
Yeah.
And we've got to be ready for the youth. We've got to be ready for the youth, because if we don't, then we have ourselves to blame. And what does that mean? It means that we have a lot of youth who are coming out into the job market, who are going to university, who are getting trained and are looking for opportunities. And we have to create those opportunities for them.
Yeah.
I believe that our youth are extremely boisterous and have tremendous capacity. And we can see what has been done from the Nollywood, for example.
Yeah.
From also the
Music industry.
music industry.
Afrobeat.
Yes, we can see. I mean, at some point in time, those of us who are much older, you would never hear a Nigerian song or an African song hardly being played on the streets of London or New York.
Yeah.
And now that is,
commonplace.
that is, everybody sees that. So the Nigerian youth have tremendous potential. And it is for us, even bearing in mind that we're trying to create the future, to ensure that we support them, that we give them the tools, we make our environment more enabling, and that we give them hope. I know that the recent past and the crisis we are in now, and by the way, let me say something here. The crisis that Nigeria is in is not peculiar to Nigeria alone, because sometimes we tend to feel that it is just us alone. It isn't. This is a global thing. And if many of you think back to the COVID era, a lot of things started to happen then. Okay, and the reactions from various countries put them in various stages of economic disrepair. And you can see what happened in the United States, for example. Interest rates went up for so long, and it took them so long to bring them down. England, exactly the same thing. Many parts of Europe, the same. We have the same, but it's a bit more peculiar because perhaps we didn't do certain things, certain structural things earlier, but it's never too late. It's never too late. And honestly, I just want to encourage the youth. I take what we have done, and I will continue to refer to this, the whole issue of IMTOs and foreign remittances. It almost seemed like an impossibility a year ago, almost seemed like a possibility. but through sheer strength of determination, we are now at a stage where, as I said last month, we had up to 600 million US dollars from that segment alone. So these things can be done. They can be done. And with the strength of character that Nigerians are known to have, and with the support that we, as older people and people who have access to institution building and access to support structures, we must support the youth to ensure they achieve their greater potential.
So, we're going to go into what I call rapid fire questions. I'll say, give you a few options, you choose one.
No dinner.
And then there'll be questions from the room, but this is just very quick. Jollof rice, pounded yam, frijon, or dodo?
You should know the answer. With a name like Cardoso, can only be frijon.
Actually, that's why it's there. So, Monopoly, chess, Scrabble, Ludo, or draft? Chess. Afrobeat, jazz, juju, classical music, or reggae?
Afrobeat.
Afrobeat. And at that point, we will go to the room and see at least 2 questions from the room. Oh my goodness, I can see 4 hands. And I'll start with my sister. I see one woman with her hand up. I shall be partial.
Thank you. Thank you to the governor for a great discussion. My question is, and my name is Amaka. I run Africa for Eurasia Group. My question is, you mentioned about the trade-offs. You had about the trade-offs, very difficult trade-offs that you're having. And in your answer, you talked about fundamentals. I'm very empathetic about that because a lot of the problems that you are facing with FX scarcity and the Naira being under pressure is because we just don't have enough exports, okay? Now, my question to you is, I think you've acknowledged this several times, which is there's only so much the central bank can do about that. The rest of the government needs to have a coherent, clear vision about growing non-oil exports. Do you see a role, and I ask this understanding how difficult this question is, do you see a role for yourself in pushing the government to have a clearer vision that all Nigerians can buy into about what the plan to raise non-oil exports is? Because at the end of the day, if that doesn't happen, you can only raise interest rates for so long until you get into trouble. So thank you.
There's a hand to the right of my right.
Through the moderator, I would like to express my appreciation to the CBN governor. And I think Mr. Cardoso have shown that when the going is tough, only the tough gets going. And I'm quite impressed the way you stood your ground, that we have to be consistent to target inflation. Despite those questions fired to you by the moderator, and by the way, a round of applause for the moderator. I'm really impressed. You stood your ground and on the policy so far, the monetary policy. And there's no doubt about that, to be your consistency, talking of stabilization, extremely, very, very important. But, Mr. Governor, my question is that stabilization to what goal, for what purpose? In this hall last year, I think October last year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu within the context of Renew Hope agenda, which some of us we are really committed to. We dance for it, we campaign for it. He made a pledge here that he was committed to $1 trillion economy in less than a decade. Double-digit growth rate. I think the question is that how does this policy, inflation targeting, orthodoxy in this respect, how does it deliver us there? I think this is the critical question. In fact, on the contrary, we can see that the policies so far had even impacted negatively on our GDP in terms of numbers. So, I mean, I'm fully with you so that we can have a way to arrive there. And the last one, the madam also referred to this point. The chief economist of the World Bank was here yesterday, and he was unambiguous in saying that we have become the capital of poverty in the world. We have overtaken
India.
Again, how does this policy take us out of this? And I'm raising this because when you talk of poverty, I think we should also disaggregate poverty. You know, the most scary one is income poverty, the wage poverty. Mr. Governor, when you came in, if we had gotten this new minimum wage, which President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was really committed to, in fact, he was committed to, and is still committed to living wage. This is the 6th national minimum wage, in which we move minimum wage for 30,000 to 70,000. I've been in this business for decades. This is the largest minimum wage we've gotten in nominal terms. At the rate, exchange rate, when you came in, get the number, 600, 700, that will come to about $92 or $82. Now, get the new rate now, it's about $44 per month. Directors, university professors, and just less about $350. Some directors now do kabu, they abandon their vehicles. So what I'm saying in summary is that we must link policy rates, all the policies that you are pursuing, monetary policy, to the goals, you know, which Madam asked you, and above all, to the commitment of the president to deliver double-digit growth, alleviate poverty, and take us to grow this economy in a dynamic way. I want us to see how do we get there with this policy of orthodoxy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. do you want to take these two and then we'll take two others?
Sure.
Okay, so he'll respond to these two and then we'll take two others.
Okay.
So your role in getting the rest of government to do their part, stabilization is not an end in itself. So what exactly is the end? And do these policies actually help us to achieve, get to that $1 trillion economy that the president has declared that we will get to in less than a decade?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, the issue of the government, the federal government, and ensuring that they are doing the things that they need to be done. Now, again, our role is that of advisor to government. We are advisor to government. And in that capacity, what we have done is we've set up a unit within the central bank to ensure that we are able to move that statement and responsibility beyond just a cliche, advisor to government. We are trying to actualize that. So what we do now is on a regular basis, we do give advisory on things that we see and the sort of feedback that we're able to garner over a period of time. So we do that. We do that. And that is a function that we take very seriously. And we are going to continue to emphasize on it. In addition to that, we are also, and something that many people may not realize is that even at the central bank, we do have part of the leadership of the Ministry of Finance on our board. We have the Accountant General, and we have the Minister, and we have the PAMSEC Finance. They sit on our board. And increasingly, the dialogue that takes place between those within that entity and within the board helps to advance the cause of some of the things that you are talking about. We've also created a couple of committees, both with the trade side and others, to ensure that we're able to harmonize and work closer with them. To answer your question, we recognize that there's need for collaboration. We recognize that. And we talk about it regularly. And it is something that we are committed to strengthening over a period of time. We're committed to strengthening that, because I think it's clear to everybody that that collaboration would, be more effective and efficient for the government. Then onto the issue of stabilization, and where does stabilization really take us to, and all these hikes and things like that. Isn't that anti-growth? I guess that is really the issue. Yeah. Now, to be honest, on the face of it, it may appear so, on the face of it. But if you look at empirical evidence, which we have, it will clearly indicate that we would have been a lot worse off if that wasn't done. We would have been a lot worse off if that wasn't done. And again, back to this last NPC meeting where interest rates were hiked, and it appeared as if, why hike when inflation seems to be moderating and things seem to be under some control? But of course, based on data available and based on the fact that we are now seeing the increase in pump prices, I think it's clear that that anticipatory move had to be made. It was only prudent to do it. And believe me, if we didn't, perhaps the consequences would be a lot more dire. Having done it, one is a lot more comfortable that we will soon return to the moderation in inflation. Yes, this latest figures show a slight uptick, but I'm convinced that we had done the right thing in anticipating that costs were going to go up in a certain direction, and there was need to control that in a measured manner. And as I said, I'm confident that going forward, because of the anticipatory move we had made, we will see a situation where it will be, the moderation in inflation will be a lot more acceptable to us. So again, I think the question also begs on the issue of trade-off. Okay, it does beg on the issue of trade-off. And the answer to that, quite frankly, is back to what I said earlier. And that is, we must tame inflation. We must tame inflation. Inflation affects purchasing power. The very people that you expect will be able to provide that growth that industrialists are looking for, if they are not empowered to do so, then you'll be in a very, very dire situation over a period of time. So these things need to be done. We do need to bring inflation down. And the hope really is that these things can be done, you know, in a more rapid manner, such that they now give time for interest rates to come down and for encouragement to be given to the private sector to continue to thrive. And I want to just take him up on a particular issue with respect to growth. It isn't true. If you look at the statistics, the economy has grown. It has grown. In spite of the tightening, it has grown. So certain sectors are growing. They may not be growing at the rate you want them to, but they've shown signs of an uptick. Okay. But again, that's not to say that I'm only saying this to say that those two policies, though they seem so far apart, they may not be as far apart as they actually seem. When you dig deep down and look at certain sectors, you will see that certain ones have continued, have been able to go up in spite of a tightening stand.
Thank you. We'll take two, we can't take all the questions, but we'll take two last questions. Mr. Laoye and the gentleman who's had his hand up from the first. So Mr. Laoye and then him, and then we'll round up.
Thank you, Governor. And as an ex-central banker, my joy is that your envisioned end state is that you will restore the central bank to where we have professionalism, competence, and orthodoxy. That's my joy. My question to you is this. I'm glad that you've clawed back from intervention, but the gap still exists. For instance, we're involved in agric. Because we didn't get involved early enough, some of the challenges around production we experience now. My question to you is that, what are we doing to repurpose Bank of Agric, Development Bank of Nigeria, and even BOI, so that we can do the needed intervention in a manufacturing sector and the agric sector? What is CBN helping to, because at least the development institutions report to you. Thank you, sir.
And then the question from the gentleman.
So do I begin by saying Your Excellency, because all governors in Nigeria are Excellency. Good evening, sir. I want to ask, I had two encounters, one China, and second one, Egypt. Investor or partner in China is a private investor, but the constraint is that he cannot move his money offshore without the approval of certain board. Cairo, another encounter. I can only be your technical partner in Nigeria. I'm not allowed to move my money offshore. Is this policy healthy? And if I'm a Nigerian, am I allowed, or will I be allowed, or will it be healthy for me to take my money 100% offshore to invest? Their reason is employment generation. That is why they have to regulate their own citizens investing abroad. So secondly, the Vice President World Bank yesterday said, if we follow your policy religiously, it will take us 16 or 15 years to get out of it. Well, it's a testimony from someone, we thank God. But do you think we can get out earlier? Realistically, you are lucky for the next year to 2027. Who comes after you, we don't know. Are you to continue? We don't know. If we are to peg it to 2027, Do you see us going 50 or 60% getting your policy, achieving your target? Thirdly, Nigeria say 60% youth. If as a graduate today, I have my ideas, talents, but I don't have money, where do I run to? Who do I run to sell this idea to collaborate with me, being an innocent young man? Thank you, sir.
Okay. So thank you. How do we strengthen BOI, Bank of Agri, getting them to be the interventionist arm of government? And then can a Nigerian move funds offshore to invest outside of Nigeria? Because he's seeing other countries restricting their citizens from investing externally because they're trying to create jobs internally.
Okay, thank you very much. On the issue of,
And yesterday's discussion by the chief economist of the World Bank saying we have to stay the course and 10 to 15 years, can that be accelerated?
on the issue of intervention, BOI, etc. Let me say, perhaps let me even give some context to this. Intervention, when coming into the central bank, we found a lot of intervention projects. And the total figure was in excess of 10 trillion naira. And quite frankly, there's need to bring some order into that. 10 trillion is a lot of money. It's an incredible amount of money. I mean, the budget size of Lagos is 2-point-something trillion, I think 2.7 or 2.5. So just to give you an idea of the quantum that we are talking about here. And much as we say that we are not involving ourselves in intervention, I just want to bring clarity to something. And that is that some elements of the interventions would need to be completed. So that would require resources and it will require time. So the pool of intervention money is not infinite. So to the extent that there's already some work in progress, that work in progress needs to be run off first before you can really and truly start talking about even anything else without distorting, and even those need to be properly faced without completely distorting your economy. So to answer your question, that now gives time to help and work with some of the development banks to create the capacity that you are talking about. That gives time to do it. So you don't expect that some of these changes, you'll see them overnight, because it won't. You see, unfortunately, as I said, the quantum is so large that a certain element of orderliness needs to be reined in there. And of course, we need to also get back some of the intervention funds that had been out there, those that can be gotten back. But we are committed, we've said it, we work quite collaboratively, and we're regularly having conversations, and we have investments with BOI. So, and I spoke about the code that we signed for women entrepreneurs the other day, which involved BOI
And BBN.
Development Bank of Nigeria and ourselves. So we definitely is something that we are very keen on doing, and with time we will find out the appropriate model that will ensure that we can do this thing in a reasoned manner that will not get us into any trouble. Then the issue of can you take your funds abroad?
Yes, to invest, and then can we accelerate when we get to our North Star?
Yeah.
Instead of 10 to 15 years,
Yeah.
can it happen earlier?
Yeah. In terms of investing, I think for now, I would say that, charity begins at home. We need all the support that we can get. And to be candid with you, I will not say that the answer is no, it isn't. But I will just say that in terms of suasion, I think what we need now is to ensure that investments are here because they are needed. Take, for example, now, and it may seem like a threat in the sense that exchange rate has come down so low, but that also is an opportunity, because much as exchange rate has come down so low, it can help to boost your exports. Because you become a lot more competitive in the export trade. So I just want to encourage people to say that, the opportunities are here. Okay, things are recalibrating in a particular direction. It's not perfect, but definitely there are opportunities for people to single out and invest in, because by the time you are exporting out to another country with the cost of inputs here and the relatively low naira, you have a situation where the demand for your goods are definitely there. And I see it happening. When I say I see it happening, others are doing it. And the interest is growing in leaps and bounds. Now, the issue of the World Bank chief economist, well, I wasn't here, but I heard about that, and I also read the speech. And to be honest, my interpretation wasn't exactly how I think he was perhaps misunderstood. I think what he was basically saying, my understanding of what he said, was that the policies that the central bank are taking are putting Nigeria on the right path. And frankly, I didn't mention the World Bank when I said earlier that if you look at the rating agencies, the international financial institutions, it's all the same thing. They're all saying that. And I doubt they can all be wrong. So I know that, we are in a situation where many are very cynical, perhaps, understandably so, because of the way things have turned out over a period of time. But I personally don't think that, cynicism should be the order of the day today. I think that we should accept that there have been a lot of mistakes made over a long period of time. We should accept that we missed the opportunity to diversify our economy. We should accept that we are a monolithic economy. We should accept that any movements, any shocks in a situation where you are a monolithic economy, you're bound to feel a lot more pain than you would if you're diversified. I think that is just a fact, and I think we should accept it. And clearly, the way out to having a buoyant economy and being able to diversify and create different revenue streams cannot be something that we would expect we would succumb in the short term. I think we should be realistic about it. I don't think we need the chief economist or anybody to come and tell us that. I think it's pretty obvious. I think the point is that we need to keep our focus on ensuring that we do those things that take us out of an unsustainable situation we find ourselves. We need to put our focus on the ball. And I get the sense that that is what he was referring to, that in the not too distant future, you will be head and shoulders above everybody else. Because really and truly, if Nigeria is able to do all those things that we should have done a long time ago, nobody can match us. At least on the continent, nobody can match us. That does not mean that it will take 17 or how many years he said, I don't know, for us
10 to 15.
10 to 15 years for the pain to go. I don't think that is the issue, because if they are all saying that we are on the right track, we are on the right track, and I believe we are.
Yeah.
When we will, at what stage would we find ourselves in a perfectly painless situation? I couldn't tell you. However, I do know that if we continue the way we are, we will find that life will be a lot more bearable for everybody, and that if we continue beyond the short term to the 10, 15 or so many years we're talking about, certainly Nigeria will be the envy of many countries.
And I think on that positive note, I'd like to say thank you very much, Mr. Governor. Can we please give him a round of applause? Thank you for your time at a very busy period. And thank you to each and every single one of you for being here and for listening all through this fireside chat. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for them.